Donald Trump has been in Davos this week for the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, along with a rogues gallery of figures from the political right, from Javier Milei to Nigel Farage to Elon Musk. Here he is giving some of his so-called special address.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. It's great to be back in beautiful Davos, Switzerland, and to address so many respected business leaders, so many friends, few enemies. Certain places in Europe are...
Deference and gratitude for being here at this big event from Donald Trump there, and from many figures from the political right, which should seem like a little bit of a surprise. You see, for years and years, the political right have been trying to convince us that the World Economic Forum is the cause of all of the rot in society, an organization which is attempting to impose on us from above some sort of globalist conspiracy involving vaccines and 15-minute cities and maybe even communism of a type. In fact, here is Nigel Farage as recently as June 2024 telling Twitter, as it maybe then was, or was it already X at that point, that Reform UK will reject the influence of the World Economic Forum and cancel Britain's membership of it. Here, similarly, is Elon Musk saying that he declined an invitation to Davos because he thought, not because he thought they were engaged in diabolical scheming, as many others did at this point, but because it sounded boring AF, lol. This man's like 50-something, I think, just to clarify. And I do believe that the WEF later revealed that they actually hadn't invited him since about 2015, and he hadn't declined an invitation. But even when not coming from the pulpit of these particular figures, many in their orbit for a long time held on to conspiracy theories that this organization was the cause of the world's ills. A lot of this focused around the Great Reset, which was a sort of during COVID and slightly after COVID sort of branding exercise really that the WEF ran surrounding the idea that, you know, we'd had a rough few years as a world and might need to rethink how we organize our societies. Climate change, waste, food. In reality, the Great Reset branding was something that the World Economic Forum had been using for some time. So much did these conspiracy theories take over that the BBC and like various other news organizations had to do explainers on them. Particularly powerful parts of the Great Reset conspiracy theory were 15-minute cities. Don't know whether you remember much about those. Here is I sort of went back into the archive to dig up some clips from the height of 15-minute city mania. Here is a channel called Redacted, which is feels like it's just something you pick out of the basket of names for right-wing podcasts.
Protests are popping up around the world against something called 15-minute cities. Now, we've covered the 15-minute cities here on the show, and we warned you about them. And now the warnings are starting to catch on, and more people are becoming aware of what these governments are doing around these 15-minute cities. I like to think about it this way. If the World Economic Forum, what is a 15-minute city? If the World Economic Forum could lay out its perfect design for humanity, it would look like this. You would never leave your house. You would get rid of your car. You would ride your bike everywhere. You would walk to everything you needed within a 15-minute radius of your home, right? The pharmacy, the grocery store, grandma, everything, the school, everything would be within 15 minutes of your home. A quick bike ride, a 15-minute walk.
That's right. Grandma might live within a 15-minute walk, and we wouldn't want that. Other parts of the Great Reset kind of bag of conspiracy theories included the kind of you will own nothing and borrow everything. You'll own nothing and be happy, sorry, was the kind of go-to tagline, which in reality was drawn from a report, I believe. Even if you missed out on 15-Minute City Mania and the Great Reset conspiracy theories, you will perhaps have come across this phrase, "you will own nothing and be happy." The reality is that it came from an article that was published on their website, sort of predicting trends that were going on into the future. And it started to be talked about at a time when kind of sharing economy nonsense was being talked about an awful lot. But all of this sort of got packaged up into this very kind of evil conspiracy theory in which the World Economic Forum was kind of these shady elites trying to impose communism on the world, and, you know, making us cycle 15 minutes to see grandma, which you can try. You'll never make me see my grandma. Oh, that's sad. In truth, I think it's probably best to think of the Great Reset kind of on a similar level to when BP tried to rebrand itself as Beyond Petroleum, while still being a very large oil group. You know, it was kind of one of these like attempts for a company or organization or set of organizations that does a lot of bad stuff to just be like, hey. And yet, this week we have seen a massive turnaround. Both Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, in particular, people who, remember, have previously been vehemently opposed to this organization and the things it is doing, going there to present on panels, to talk to audiences. Elon Musk, I believe, presenting with the current co-chair of the organization on stage. The Guardian, not long ago, leading with the headline, after years of criticizing Davos, Nigel Farage heads to Davos. Some even better ones across the British press over the last few days in terms of using Farage's own words to describe the WEF at the same time as he's heading off to chat to them. But this has created a fantastic amount of sort of apologia and attempts to kind of explain why, yes, this place is definitely evil and bad, but also I have to go. Nigel Farage fantastically posted a whole video to his X account explaining why he had to be on the inside of the tent rather than outside it.
The online conspiracy is running riot. Nigel Farage is going to Davos. He's become a globalist. Slow down. I spent 20 years going to the European Parliament. Never once did I change my views. In fact, they probably hardened. And yes, I am going to Davos, as is President Milei of Argentina and Donald Trump of the USA. And my message to Davos is going to be very, very simple. You guys, the globalists, have had it your way for far too long. British governments have been craven to you, rather pandering to you than standing up for the interests of British people and British workers. And I'm going to tell them, all of that is going to change. There is going to be a new government in Britain that puts British priorities first. So ask yourself a question. Would you rather I stayed at home, or rather I went and gave that honest message?
Even better, I think, for me, was a sort of a short essay, I think is the only way to describe this, written by a kind of right-wing influencer called Connor Tomlinson, who I had mistakenly remembered as being a GB News presenter. I think he's not even that. He is, I think he's maybe in the Sargon of Akkad orbit in some way. The first thing I managed to pull up from him was him complaining that the Reform Party have selected a candidate for Mayor of London who is a Muslim. So he is sort of too racist for Reform at the moment.
So Nigel Farage and Reform UK have selected their candidate for Mayor of London in 2028 to face off against the internationally despised Sadiq Khan, the Muslim mayor who has ruined London. And instead of former SAS serviceman Ant Middleton, who spoke at Reform Conference in 2024 but was dropped because he voiced support for Tommy Robinson, they have chosen Layla Cunningham, someone that most people wouldn't have heard of outside of Britain, but she is a Muslim mother of 7. That's right, Reform UK...
The electoral disaster of selecting a candidate for Mayor of London who most people outside of the UK wouldn't have heard of. You know, disaster, all those sort of people who are voting in the London mayoral elections from outside the UK. But Connor wrote a sort of lengthy essay about how it was important that Nigel Farage was going to the WEF, even though the WEF is really bad, because, you know, he needs to ingratiate himself with world leaders, particularly the Saudis, which is sort of fascinating. You know, if he's going to speak, he's going to use it to insult the globalist technocrats, you know, and Keir Starmer. You know, he concludes by telling us that actually, you know, this isn't bending to all of the things that he said. You know, here is the this must be the FT. Go judging by the color of the screenshot. Another example here of a fantastic headline where the FT have gone for Nigel Farage to attend Davos conference as he derided as jaunt for globalists. But according to Con Tomlinson here, it's a smart realpolitik move for Farage and Reform. You know, they can build business and geostrategic relationships and then denounce Davos as a bunch of treacherous globalists and pivot to a new US/UAE/Israel aligned annual conference instead. I've clearly missed something in terms of the internal politics of the Reform Party here, but fantastic, absolutely fantastic. But look, here's the really fascinating part about all of this, is that the World Economic Forum, whilst it has somehow managed to attract the ire of the world's political right, seemingly sometimes, actually encapsulates all of the things that at least the establishment within the political right, here in Britain, in the US, in much of the world, actually wants. I brought up a little while ago a tweet from Nigel Farage where he talked about wanting to cancel Britain's membership of the WEF. But in reality, that's not a thing he can do because Britain isn't a member of the World Economic Forum. Countries cannot be members, only companies can. Here is the list of World Economic Forum partners. These are companies which pay money each year to be part of the WEF, to send people to their conferences, all of which kind of just costs a huge amount of money. And it is basically a who's who of global companies, right? Of massive corporations. If you wanted to, I don't know, pick a Coca-Cola or someone, I imagine that. There's the Carlsberg Group. There's something sort of fun about being there, and you're just the person from Carlsberg. Condé Nast, the publisher. What was I looking for? Coca-Cola. Where's Coca-Cola? Surely they're here. You know, yeah, Coca-Cola HBC. The Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company, which is the manufacturer and distributor of Coca-Cola brands, apparently. You know, this is like a list. Colgate, toothpaste. This is like a sort of a list of large global corporations. If you want more kind of context around this, you might look at its leadership, right? So the WEF is currently going through an interim chair finding process because Klaus Schwab, who founded the organization and was its chair for many, many years, has been the subject of a lot of scandal. He has been accused of being a bit of a creep to younger employees. He was accused of basically letting his wife spend a lot of expenses money, despite the fact that she didn't actually work for the organization, and also accused of kind of a doctoring report. So the WEF used to put out a report called the Global Competitiveness Report, I believe, where it would sort of compare countries with how competitive they were, and always, you know, how competitive they were in terms of companies wanting to go and do business there. Effectively, he stands accused of doctoring certain countries' entries in that report to make them more favourable, largely to avoid political controversy. And one of the two co-chairs that they have gone with is Larry Fink from BlackRock. So if you sort of want to kind of understand what this organisation does, its members are massive companies. One of its co-chairs is Larry Fink from BlackRock. From top to bottom, this is an organisation that exists to kind of serve the interests of companies in terms of promoting their priorities, right? In terms of, you know, if we talk about that global competitive report, it's about encouraging countries to design their laws and taxes, etc., in such ways that companies might want to do business there and to like open themselves up to business, but also to be able to facilitate meetings between high-profile movers at Davos and other events. like in the past, I think I've tended to think of it as effectively like a model UN for companies, right? A world in which they can imagine themselves not only as leaders in business, but the masters of the universe. And probably the most terrifying thing is that is working. I want to play you a clip from Mark Carney's speech at the WEF earlier this week, which was otherwise really celebrated for the ways in which it stood up against some of Trump's rhetoric and actions in recent weeks.
Thank you very much, Larry. I'm going to start in French and then I'll switch back to English. Merci, Larry. C'est un plaisir et un devoir d'être parmi vous en ce point tournant pour le Canada et pour le monde.
And so I looked this up. That was in French, but sort of lovely bit of adding some cultural flair to this week's Tom Nicholas 2 video. I did pull up the transcript just so I could check that sort of broadly what I thought he said. So thank you, Larry. It is both a pleasure and a duty to be with you tonight. Emmanuel Macron also gave a speech the same day, I believe, but maybe a different day. And he opened with similar words of gratefulness and praise.
Thank you very much, Larry, for your words. Your Majesties, distinguished heads of state and governments, President Lagarde, ministers, ambassadors, business leaders, ladies and gentlemen.
This is a conference at which business leaders goes amongst ambassadors, presidents, your highnesses, and this is a world in which those people exist in that same kind of respect and political power. Like I joked a moment ago that the WEF sort of exists as a kind of model UN for companies, but increasingly that does seem to be working. The WEF website, I think, said that it had something like over 60 heads of state attended Davos this year, and all sort of opened their speeches with, "Thank you for letting me be here, business leaders of the world. Thank you for letting me participate in this." But more broadly, I think it'd be unfair to say that speeches to the UN General Assembly don't get covered, because they do. But there's been press all over Davos this year in a way that I don't think has existed around the UN for some time. This year's Davos in particular really does feel like a shift away from a global politics that is centered around liberal democratic institutions towards one in which wealth and corporate power and military power matter more than ever. This is the thing that, as things stand, looks like it could supplant the UN as the key global event. And the real horror we see of that is in something like the Board of Peace. Partway through the week, we saw Donald Trump announce his Board of Peace plan, which, as well as being part I don't want to say diplomatic military effort, part kind of diplomatic effort in terms of different countries working together, is also part horrible development company almost, right? Where countries and companies can come together to plan what they're going to do with the Gaza Strip, and which bits are going to be coastal tourism, and which bits are going to be residential areas, and which bits are going to be data centers and agriculture and sports facilities, and divvy it up so that developers can go in and build stuff, right, to have the Trump Gaza or whatever. Which brings us to the weirdest part of all of this, I think, for right-wingers, is that for many years they have talked about this institution as though it is their big bad. And yet, at least for those that are establishment right-wingers, right? The Trumps, the Farages, the Musks, etc. This is the world that they want, right? They don't want a United Nations in which the diplomats of democratically elected governments go to set policy. They want a world in which business leaders can meet with politicians, and probably the business leaders are more important than the politicians, and they can divvy the world up that way. They want a UN that is sponsored by Coca-Cola and sort of has the same invite list as a Jeffrey Epstein party. But I suppose wanting them to be consistent on that is expecting right-wingers like Farage and Musk to be consistent in their views, which evidently they are not. Thank you so much for watching this brief clip on the Tom Nicholas 2 channel. We are trying out some kind of regular weekly or bi-weekly bits here. Previously, this was kind of clips from a live stream that I used to do, and we kind of liked the idea of doing that, but not having to do the live stream, because lots of people watch the clips and didn't watch the live stream, and this allows us to be a little bit more responsive and allows me to put out a little bit more stuff. If you have been enjoying them, or this is the first one and you think you would like to enjoy more, then do let me know down in the comments. And if you would like us to help me and my team to make them, and to even make proper actual videos over on the main channel, then I would love it if you would consider supporting my work on Patreon at patreon.com/Tom Nicholas. There's a whole bunch of perks that you can get access to for doing so, and also you can just know that you are supporting me and my team to make more videos. But thank you so much for watching once again, and I'll see you in the next clip.